All right, everybody, welcome to the premiere episode of the New Hiker Podcast. The way this works is every Wednesday at noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, over at newhikerpodcast.buzzsprout.com, you will be able to hear the most recent episode. The following week, that episode will upload to YouTube in audio form on YouTube only for now. I apologize for that. But if you want early access to it, you can find it a week earlier at newhikerpodcast.buzzsprout.com. This is the premiere episode with Chris Phillips, aka Mischief, as he tells you about a horrific tale about what happened to him last year on the AT and how he possibly came back and is out there on the AT again. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you are a hiker that has an inspirational story on how the trail has helped you and you'd like to be a guest on the show, please, by all means, email me at newhikerpodcast@gmail.com. Get a hold of me on Instagram. Get a hold of me on Facebook. Everything is under New Hiker Podcast. Enjoy the interview, guys. You're listening to the New Hiker Podcast. I'm your host, Ken, where we will be sharing with you inspirational tales from the trail every week here on the New Hiker Podcast. Okay, welcome everybody to 2020, January 1st, the very first premiere episode of the New Hiker Podcast. New Hiker Podcast is going to be bringing you inspirational tales from the trail, and today we have got a doozy. Today I have got Chris, aka Mischief, and he is going to tell you what happened to him on the trail and how he overcame the impossible in most people's eyes. Before you end this podcast after hearing Chris's story, I ask you to please stay tuned afterwards because I have a few pieces I need to insert that somehow got lost in editing, and these pieces I don't want you to miss. And I also have another important announcement after the end. So let's go ahead and take this interview away, and we will pass it off, and you can hear from Chris in his words himself. Chris, and you want to go ahead and tell us your trail name and how you got it?
Yeah, all right. Real name's Chris, but on the trail go by Mischief. Um, I got that back in 2017 when I was doing a section to AT from Trent's Groceries to Bland, and that area is like known not to have views because you're like stalked in by the trees. Well, I decided I wanted to get some views anyway, so I climbed up a tree, got to the very top. And before I go any further, I'm just going to go ahead and say I was dressed in all black. I had like black synthetic pants on and my R1. Well, while I was coming down, I seen a couple of people coming down the trail. Didn't think nothing about nothing about it. Well, when I got to that last limb, I just jumped down and I scared this poor old man to death. He thought for sure he was screaming, "It's a bear! It's a bear!"
Oh,
He thought I was a black bear coming down out of the tree, and once he realized it was a person, he just laughed about it. And he was joking around and said, "Kids and their mischief these days." And my buddy I was hiking with, he was like, "Well, you got your trail name now. It's Mischief."
as a kid growing up, did you get to experience
Well,
the outdoors much?
well, I grew up on a farm, so I was just like out helping them and everything, and all that. And I was a big hunter. Been around guns and shoot guns all my life, but nobody in my family actually was into the outdoors kind of like I am, like wanting to go hike thousands of miles and so on and so forth. That didn't start until I was about 17. That's when I really started switching from hunting to actually hiking. Because when I was hunting a lot, I would see hikers all the time, wondering where they was going. And one stopped, and I talked to him for a while. It was actually right outside of Harrisburg, Virginia. Um, that's actually how I found out about the Appalachian Trail. Was I was out hunting out through there, and guy stopped, talked to me a little bit, and asked him where he was heading. He said he's going to Maine. I was like, "You're going to where?" And yeah, that's what kicked the rest of my years off was after that.
So, what was your decision like to finally fight the AT? I mean, did you have motive behind it?
I wanted to get away from everything, like just the everyday 9 to 5 and all the stress and everything you get. I'll use like ER saying in the Matrix, like you don't have all that when you're out on a trail. And once I realized that, it was it was like it was my home. Like I feel more at home outside doing whatever than I do sitting right here.
Is it true that is it like that everything that you experience out here when you get on the trail it like doesn't matter anymore?
To an extent, like everybody, not everybody, but 98% of the people leave all the politics at home, and like the trail is weird in a way. Like somebody that you probably wouldn't even say anything in the world to in the so-called real world, you go out there, you all have a common goal. You all living through the exact same thing day in and day out, and you become friends with the unlikeliest people.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's talk about when you got to the trail. When was your first day on the trail, and how was that experience?
I got on in April, but I was planning on doing like a flip flop kind of thing. But I started like in Shenandoah, but right after I started, I kind of messed up my ankle. So I got off trail for a while, and then I decided in October I was going to go back out. But instead of going where I was at, I was planning on just doing half of it. I was going to go from Harper's Ferry to Springer. And then I got all the way to right outside of Athens, Virginia before that happened. That was on November 28th is when it happened. I didn't get out until December 1st.
What actually happened?
What actually happened is I was, it was cold as could be. Like the day before, I was going up Chestnut Knob, and it's a little bit higher elevation. The wind was so crazy, like it was blowing me all over the place. That night, it got down to 19 degrees, and I was fine. I had all my gear and so on. But the next morning, it never did get out of the 20s that day. But that evening, I got to the next shelter. It was about, I don't know, 15, 16 miles away. Went down to get water, and it was nothing but ice down there on the rocks and everything. I went, got my water. When I went to step out, I slipped. Feet went out from under me. I fell back, hit my head, the back of my head on a rock, knocked me straight out. I woke up about 3.5, 4 hours later, and my feet was in the water. And when I got my feet out of the water, my boots were froze to my feet, and they was so froze, numb, however you want to call it. I couldn't stand up on them. So, if anybody watching knows about Knockmall Shelter, right outside Atkins, that's where it happened, and the water is straight down the hill, and then it goes to the right and down the hill about like this. Well, when I realized I couldn't walk, I crawled up the hill and remembered there's snow on the ground. I crawled up the hill, made it to the shelter. Didn't have any cell phone signal. I didn't have an inReach or a spot, anything. And my backpack was obviously in the water too. And it was made out of X-Pack, not seam sealed, so everything in there was soaked. My bag liner, I just used a contractor bag, and it had a hole in it apparently. And when I went to get my dry stuff out, everything was soaking wet. I went to take my boots off, or my, not boots, but trail runners. Went to take them off. I couldn't get them off. My socks, where they was wet, had like frozen to the outside of the shoe. And where my feet was in the water for so long, they was like shriveled, like really bad, all the way up my leg and so on. I went to pull that, and it was pulling the skin.
Ooh.
So I left that alone, and the next day, I was hoping somebody would come down the trail. Nobody came down the trail. And I was out of food at the time. I was on my way into Atkins at that road that was 4 miles away. I was going to hitch into Marion, Virginia, resupply, get back on the trail, and go on. So that's one night, no food. The next day, no food. That would make it on the 27th. No, yeah, 28th is the day, the next day or whatever. The next day, I decided I was going to try getting out there. I made it about a half a mile, even crawling. The problem was, and I didn't find out until I went to the hospital, it warmed up into the 50s that day. My feet thawed out. When frostbite thaws, it's the worst feeling in the world. I ended up like couldn't move at all. Eventually, I realized like I couldn't get over there, and so I went back to the shelter, and thankfully that night I cannot remember the guy's name to save my soul, but he was hiking with his little girl. Little girl's name was Rocket, and the only reason I remember it is because she was talking my head off. The sweetest little thing, but they was trying to shove food down me. We made the decision, like they didn't get there until it was like 10 o'clock that night. They was wanting to go leave and try to get service on, like, after you leave the shelter, you go up a kind of steep mountain. And they was thinking they'd have service up there. Well, the little girl, she was wore out and everything, and I was just telling them no, just we'll wait until in the morning. Well, about an hour later, another couple shows up, and they're the same way, everything. But I got all of them to wait until the next morning. Then, whenever they got ready to leave, they got my name and everything, and left me a little bit of food. And they went down and got me some water. And even we tried to get my boot off then, just so we could try to see what was going on. And it was like raw. Like frostbite is kind of like a burn in a way. I had third degree, or what they call deep frostbite. It went all the way to the bone.
Ooh.
Yeah. But then whenever they got service somewhere, I don't know where, about 3 o'clock that evening, uh, a police officer and a med person come in there. They gave me something in a needle. I don't know what it was, but then told me to try to walk. Yeah, but it's amazing whatever they give me would give you a pep in your step. But I walked for about 100 yards, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Then finally, everybody else showed up. They got me on the stretcher thing and took me out. And it was about an hour drive. They took me to Withville Hospital. They got the shoes off and everything and left the room. Didn't say a word to me. I just could see my feet all pink and red, and my toes and half my other foot was completely black. Then when the doctor did come in there, he just flat out said, "You're going to lose your feet," and walked out the door. And I completely lost it. Like, for me, being a hiker, that's the worst thing that could happen to you.
Right.
That's like a climber losing his hands. Well, then they sent me to Roanoke, Virginia. They couldn't do anything. Then finally, they airlifted me to Wake Forest in North North Carolina. Then I was in there for 3 weeks. Then they sent me home, said the frostbite has to run its course. I was back there a week later. It had run its course, but it also caused gangrene in my right foot. After I got back to Wake Forest, the next morning they did the first surgery. They took all my toes on my left foot. They went to do my other foot, and they cut it. When they did it, they didn't get everything like they thought they did, where it was so deep. They didn't remove all the tissue and so on. And if frostbite, if you don't get it all out, and I had gangrene too, they sewed me back up and everything. And 2 weeks later, I was back in the hospital having to have more cut off. And the crazy thing is, the whole time I was sitting there in the hospital, I was determined as hell then. The day I got out of surgery and everything, I posted a picture of my feet. And I don't remember exactly what the post said, but I put it on my Instagram. I was determined to get back out there no matter what and be better than I was before, even then. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to walk.
Now, this was just a year ago.
I had my last surgery January the 14th.
Getting the prosthetics and all that, was any plan to try to design it to where you could get back on the trail, or is this just what they gave you and you're going to make it work?
In my mind, that's what I wanted, but insurance wouldn't pay for it. Insurance will only pay for what you need. They have me in shoes that weighed 3 pounds each and was completely stiff. Didn't give me no way to push off anything. I started out just going 10, 15 steps, and then it would go a little bit more, a little bit more, till finally I was doing a mile. More than a mile. Them shoes would kill my feet so bad. I went back to the prosthetic place and told them what I was going to do, and I was going to do it no matter what. And they was like, "Well, you're going to have to pay it out of your pocket." So I sold a lot of my hiking gear, my Cadillac Flex 22, one of my backpacks, and used all the money I had. I was planning on trying to through hike AT next year, but a lot of that budget went to the prosthetics I got now.
Be able to get you out there and be able to do something.
Yep. I mean, now I can do anything I want. I can jump, I can run backwards, I can whatever. But what I got now is made for athletes like runners and so on. It's a carbon fiber bar kind of thing that goes up my calf to right below my knee, and then curves and goes around my ankle and down, and it fills in the shoe. my foot sits on top of that, and the end of it acts like a spring. So whenever I step, it pushes off just like regular feet do. So it makes me, like, now you can't even tell anything's wrong with me. It's been a long, 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 hard road, and I've wanted to give up so many times. But the only thing that's really kept me going when I couldn't get out, like, outdoors is my therapy. That's what keeps me going. But when I couldn't, it was all the support I get on my Instagram. It's crazy. Like, I've had so many people messaging me just saying how I inspired them to get off their butt and go outside. It's crazy to me because I never thought I would, like, inspire anybody.
I imagine you have a bunch of people though saying you're a fool. You can't
A lot. That post when I announced my plan, that thing has 180 some likes on it, and I had at least 100 messages. Probably about 60% of them was like, "Are you crazy? Like, a year ago you couldn't even walk, and now you thinking you're going to be able to go 984 miles?" Because I'm going from my 637 to Springer, and then taking the Bent Mackay all the way through it up to Davenport Gap where it ends. The whole reason I made my YouTube and I made my Instagram was just to show my story and to prove what I've been saying this whole entire time. Your body can come back from anything. You personally can do anything you want to in life. All you have to do is have the will, the want, the desire, and the determination to do it. And that's what I'm proving every single day, or at least that's what I'm trying to. I set a goal. I had a ramp for a wheelchair. My goal, to begin with, was just to walk out the door and go down the ramp. If I have to ride the wheelchair back up, I will. And then the next week, I went to there. The next week, I went from there back. The week after that, I went further and a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And that just kept adding up. I want to do the whole trail how I am now, mainly to show myself I can and to show other people if an amputee can do this one way or another. May not be a through hike, but do it over a year or two, just doing really long section hikes, taking the time that it takes most people to through hike a trail. But for somebody to set out and do half of it one year, taking that same amount of time, and still being really stoked about doing that much of it. Basically, to show that you don't have to go out there and expect to have to through hike the whole thing. Go out there and just do small sections. If you want to do the whole entire trail, do it like that. It don't have to be a through hike. There is so many people out there just section hiking. Christmas Day is going to be an emotional roller coaster for me. Me and one of my buddies that follows me on Instagram, we're going up to Dragon Tooth doing a sunrise hike. It's about 2.5 miles to one of the most iconic places on the AT. That will be the first time I step foot on the AT since you just can't give up. Just prove it to yourself you can. You know something that's crazy though about my plan? Out of all this stuff I could be worried about, you know what the one thing I am worried about? There's a lot of hostels down the trail that want you to take your muddy, dirty shoes off at the door. I can't walk unless I got my shoes.
All right, did I not promise you an inspirational tale from the trail? This has got to be it. If you walked away from this podcast without the understanding of you can do anything you put your mind to, please hit stop, go back to the beginning, listen to it again. You will definitely get that. First of all, I'd like to apologize to Chris personally for the audio issues. For some reason, it quit recording before we were done talking. So we missed out on a couple things, not very much, just a couple. And I'd like to cover those real quick. First of all, his Christmas hike up Dragon's Tooth, did he make it? Well, you're going to have to find that on your own by following him on social media. His social media sites include Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can check him out there at Mischief _ on the trail. all one word at the end, on the trail, Mischief _ on the trail at Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Second of all, I want to talk about the hostels in the southern part of the Appalachian Trail. Chris will be making a hike through that area, and he is concerned with having to take his shoes off at the door, as most hostels do want you to do. What I'd like to do is reach out to those of you that own hostels in that area, or those of you that know people that own hostels in that area. If you're willing to accommodate Chris and allow him to keep his shoes on so he can actually walk into the hostel, please get with him and let him know that he's more than welcome there. Also, usually what I do is I'll ask guests to talk about a charity of their choice. It costs us nothing to talk about these charities, and we may be able to help point somebody who has the funds to donate to these charities in that direction. I caught Chris kind of unfairly off guard with that, and he didn't have one on hand at the immediate time when I asked him. So we're going to go ahead and talk about a fundraiser that I have got going on in celebration of the New Hiker podcast starting up for the first 2 months of the New Hiker podcast. If you go over to the Wounded Warrior Project, you will find Trail Angels for WWP fundraiser going on over there. That is one that I have set up through the New Hiker podcast. We are trying to raise money to help our service members who have been injured do exactly what Chris has done and enjoy the rest of their lives. Make the rest of their lives a little bit easier. It's the least we can do. Many of us have experienced Trail Angels. All of us have heard of Trail Angels and seen what they can do. We all know that Trail Angels make it possible for hikers to complete their journey. Won't you be a Trail Angel for the Wounded Warrior Project and help by donating out there? The links will be down below in the show description. With that, that concludes the premiere episode of the New Hiker podcast. I greatly appreciate you tuning in. And if you are a hiker that has an inspirational tale that you would like to tell, by all means, contact me at newhikerpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to have you on the show. Got plenty of openings. Right now we have enough to get us halfway through March. I'd love to keep it going. It takes you to keep it going. So until next week, same trail, different tale.